Hello everyone, welcome to another one of my GeoGebra tutorials. This one is going to be how to create your very own Dynagraph. So first I will show you the Dynagraph that I created as well as what a Dynagraph is. Essentially we have two number lines here, an input one and an output one. And then there's some hidden function, which I can show here. We'll wait on that though. So whatever I plug into the function x, it gives me the output, and so the x dot is the independent variable. I can move that, and then the y one will change based on the function. And so I also have hidden where the zeros are, so maybe almost like a puzzle, you could try and figure out, first of all, where's the zero? You know, maybe it's right here. And then additionally, what is this function? Just based on, as we move the input, how does the output change? And so this button will show us that the zeros are right here. I made it so that you can scale the tick marks. Maybe you don't want to look at so many, you just want to look at the values between 0 and 2. Or maybe you need a whole bunch so we can scale it in. Look at bigger values for x and y. Additionally, I can show the function. This is the function 2x. And I can actually change it by going up here, and maybe we want to look at the cosine function. So I'm just going to type in cosine of x and hit enter. And so now, as I move our independent variable, you can see it kind of oscillating, just like the cosine function. You know, I want to zoom in, so I'm going to move it apart. So it goes between 1 and -1, which is pretty cool. For mine, I also made it so you can change the input, so that maybe we don't want to count by ones on the x, I want to count by pi. So now I can go from -pi to 0 up to pi and keep going that way, or I can also change the y scale to whatever I want, maybe count by 2s or something. So you can kind of set up a kind of interesting dynamic Dynagraph with those tools. I also made it so you could show the values here so that you can see exactly what our input value is. Here x is 1.7984. You can round it if you want more decimal places. And so this is pretty much a Dynagraph. So let's look at how to create one of these, or at least how I created mine. So let me grab a fresh GeoGebra file. And so the first thing I'm going to do is just create the number line. So I'm going to do that by just creating a line y equals 0, and then another one y equals 2. Now we don't need our axes, so I'm going to just right-click. I'm going to deselect my line I just made. I'm going to right-click in the graphics window. I'm just going to click the axes, make them go away. We don't need those anymore. So now I need to create the zeros for each of these. So I'm just going to type in O for origin is equal to 0, 2. So remember, this one's up at 2. So here's the origin for that one. And then I'm going to type in P is 0, 0. So there's the zeros for my two number lines. Just to make sure I don't move those, I'm going to select both of them and go to Object Properties, and we will fix Object with those. So now I won't be able to accidentally move those around, because that would be bad. Alright, so now I got to make all those additional little tick marks, and so I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But first, I want to make an independent point on this line that I can use to scale how far apart my tick marks are. So I'm just going to grab a new point, and I'm just going to click somewhere on here. It doesn't really matter where, just somewhere to the right of our 0. And now I'm going to create a ray through 2 points. And I'll show you why I'm going to do this here in a minute. So I'm going to click on the 0, and then I'm going to click on that point I just created. So now that we've created the ray, we actually don't need this point A anymore. So I'm going to go over here, I'm just going to hide it. And now I'm going to make a new point, and when I click over here, it's actually going to put it on the ray that I just created. And the reason I wanted to do that is because I don't want to be able to slide that tick mark into the negatives. I want it to stay either at 0 or greater. And that was the purpose of the ray. So now this is going to be that tick mark that I can change the spacing with. So the next step here is going to be to grab a segment between 2 points, and I'm going to make that go from my 0 to that free point. And so now it's called segment D, and it's important that we remember this. So this one's segment D. If you're following along, it should be D for yours. If it's not, just make sure you know the variable name for that. So now, instead of just individually clicking out all of the remaining tick marks, I'm going to take advantage of the spreadsheet. So I'm going to go in my spreadsheet here. Let's make it a little bit bigger. And I'm going to make a new point. I'm going to type in equals, and then this point here, the free one, is point B. So I'm going to have a new point, but it's going to be related to where B is. So it's going to be B plus, I want it to be shifted over equal to the distance between these two. And the distance between these two is that segment D. So I want to do B plus D comma 0. And so if you notice, it just created a brand new point that is equally spaced, just like we want. And so now if we move this, again, it's going to keep it evenly spaced. Alright, so now I need another one. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this cell, and I'm going to grab this little blue box in the lower right corner. I'm just going to drag it down once. Alright, and now I'm going to double click on the second cell. And so now instead of adding D once, I want to add D twice, and hit enter. So now I have 2 points, and they're all going to scale as we move this one. Alright, so now I need to make the negative values, the ones over here. So I'm gonna start a new column here, and again I'm gonna type equals, and now I want it to go from the origin point, point O, minus, again, that distance D, comma 0. So there's our negative one. Again, I'm gonna grab this one and copy it down once, and then double click, and change this to 2D for the second one. Alright, now I need the second axis one, so I'm going to do that quick. Exact same process. This one is point P, so we're going to type equals point P plus D comma 0. Alright, and then I'm going to drag it down, copy it, 2, then we'll make the negative ones, P minus D comma 0, drag it down, set that one to 2, and so now we need to make a whole bunch more of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of the cells we just created, and then I'm going to grab the blue box and I'm just going to drag it down, and we'll make 50 points, 50 tick marks. So I'm going to drag it all the way down to cell 50 and release. And the spreadsheet is going to look at this increasing number, because if you remember, we have 1D here, and then the one below it we had, we had 2D in this one, and so it's just going to keep counting to 3, 4, 5, etc., creating all of these little tick marks. So if you notice, we can move them around, and we have all of our tick marks created. So I'm done with the spreadsheet, so we're going to click that away. So now the next step is to actually make them look like tick marks. So the first thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to go to my line, and I'm going to make it thicker, probably go halfway. Alright, and so now I want to change it so all of the little tick marks actually look like tick marks instead of points. So I'm just going to click on, say, B and go to Object Properties. If you noticed, all of the points we created don't show up over here. GeoGebra as a default creates them as auxiliary objects, which means they won't show up in the algebra window, but we can still access them through the object properties. So if you notice, they're all over here. So I'm just going to grab A, then all the way down 200 points, 201, whatever, and hold shift and then click P, so I have all of the points selected. And then I'm going to go to style, and I'm going to change the point style to be this little plus sign so they actually look like tick marks. Well, they're kind of small. Let's make them bigger. I think 7's pretty good. Alright, so now I can quit out of that, and now we have these nice little tick marks on our number line. Alright, and it's nice because our zeros are blue, and the one that we can move is a lighter blue. I'm actually going to change this. We'll make it orange so it's a little bit more noticeable. And so now we have our number lines. So let's kind of center this. So the next step here is going to be to make the independent and dependent points. So the independent point, I can just simply click on my line somewhere, try not to click on one of the tick marks, just click on the line to create our point. Right away I'm going to change it, and I'm going to make it red so it's a little bit more noticeable, and we'll make it bigger. Alright, and so this is just going to be able to freely move anywhere on this top number line. And again, since we clicked it on there, it won't be able to come off. So now the output variable is going to be dependent on this one. So before we create that, let's create a function. So I'm going to go to my input bar and do f of x. We'll just do equals x for now. It doesn't really matter what you type it in as, because we'll be able to change it later. And then I don't want to see it either, so I'm going to hide it over here. I'm going to click the little bubble. So that's gone. It's just important we've established a function. The next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to create my dependent point. So I'm going to call it, let's see, A, B, C. We'll call it D. D is equal to, well, the input is going to be the x value of this point. So I'm going to refer to point C, but I only want the x value of that. So I'm going to type in x, and then in parentheses, point C. So this is going to return the x coordinate of point C, and then I want the y coordinate just to be 0, because remember, this line is y equals 0. And so now, again, our function is just f of x, so they should just match up the whole time, but point D does move as we move point C. I'm going to change the color. We'll make it green, and we'll make it a lot bigger. Alright, so now the next step is going to be to create an input box that allows us to change our function, because it would be a big hassle to create a new Dynagraph for every function we wanted to do. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to grab the input box tool, then we'll put it up here. The caption is just going to be the text that shows up before it, so I'm going to type in f of x and then equals. And then it's important that we link the input box to the function we've created. So in this little drop down menu, I'm going to, well, it's right here at the top, I'm just going to grab f of x, the function we created, and then click apply. And so now we have this input bar that directly controls our function. So I can go up here, and let's say I wanted to change my function to 2x plus 2. Hit enter. It changes our function now. Or maybe I want it to be x squared. Oh, for some reason this isn't changing. Let's look at D again. Oh, I'm sorry. We want the x coordinate of C to be actually inputted into our function. So we need to do f of x of C. And then I'll hit enter. Sorry about that. So now it's actually plugging in the x coordinate of this point into our function and then returning it as this point down here. So now as I move it, it's going to move, and you can definitely see the parabola shape here. Hitting 0, and then once we get negative, it's going to stay positive. So now that we've created our input function bar and we have our points created, the next thing we need to do is set up the whole scaling thing, because GeoGebra is counting using the axes right now. So if you notice the red point here, this is at 1, so the output's at 1. But in reality, the way I want it to show up is I want 1 all the way over here. So we're going to have to figure out how to do that. So let's hide the axes again. So I'm going to go back into my point D. I'm going to change the object properties. And so the way that we're going to do this is I'm going to take the x coordinate that I'm plugging into the function, and I want to divide that by the distance between the 0 and that first tick mark. And remember, that distance is d. So I'm going to go, make sure you're clicking inside the parentheses for the function. I'm going to divide this by d. Alright, so that's going to give me the scaled down input value for that. Whoops. Divided by d. And then after I've put the scaled down version into the function, I want the output to be scaled back up by d. So divide by d, and then I'm also going to, outside of the function, multiply it by that distance d. Then make sure you hit enter to save that. And so if you notice, the dot moved. And so let's look and see if this worked. So here on our number line, this is our 1, not what GeoGebra has on the axes. So if I move this to 0, okay, so that matches up, 0 squared is 0. If I move this to 1, 1 squared is 1, that's good. If I go to 2 here, 2 squared is 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, so it looks like we have it all set up. So let's try out another function just to make sure. Let's try cosine of x, hit enter. And if you notice, it's going to oscillate between -1 and 1. So now the next thing I'm going to want to do is be able to hide my function. You know, maybe you're using it kind of like a puzzle for your class. Their goal is to figure out what is the function based on the input-output. So I'm going to use a checkbox to do this. If you saw in mine, I use buttons, but that's a little bit extra work. We don't really need to worry about that. So let's just use a checkbox. We'll put that checkbox right there. And the caption will just say, show function. And then now before I click apply, I should be able to just click on this input box once, and it's going to throw it in here. Otherwise I could have selected it from this drop down menu, but there's so many things in here I didn't really want to scroll through that. But now what this is going to do is this checkbox is going to toggle whether this input box is shown or not. So I'm just going to click apply. And now if I click the checkbox, it's going to disappear or reappear. It's helpful for checkboxes to make sure you fix them in place. So I'm going to go to Object Properties and fix the checkbox so I can't actually accidentally move it around. I can also change the properties for the input bar. I can change the text. I want to make it large. And the color, you know, maybe you want to make it some fancy color. Change the style. The length is pretty long. I don't think I'm going to input a function this long. So let's just make it 6 long. And if I wanted to, I could put an image in there or something like that. If you noticed, if you click on Advanced, there's this condition to show object, and then there's this variable e. E is the Boolean variable for this show function checkbox. When it's checked, it's true. When it's unchecked, it's false. And so pretty much E is going to be the determinant of whether this is shown or not. And so let's say now that we want to hide our zeros. We don't want our zeros to show up or be recognized. So let's make another checkbox here. Alright, and we'll just call this show zeros. And I'm actually just going to not going to add anything to that. I'm just going to click apply. Alright, and so I'm going to go into point O. I'm going to go to the advanced properties. And so if you see there's these colors, these dynamic colors, I can change the color of the point. So let's say that red is 0, it goes between 0 and 1. So 0, 0, 1, this is just pretty much, it just makes it blue. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this by this checkbox, which is G. And then hit enter. And so now, here, let's move this red point out of the way. If I click this, it's going to turn it black. Because when G is true, it's equal to 1, and when it's false, it's equal to 0. So I'm going to be able to do that for point P as well. Object properties. The colors I want to be 0, 0, whoops, and then 1 times G, or just G. And then also my orange one. Let's find that in here. Here it is, B. But this one I want it to be, you know, a different color. I don't want it to be blue. We'll change it so it's green to make this easy. So we'll go 0, and then here I'll put in G again. And hit enter there. And so now, this checkbox is going to turn those on, essentially.